So before I jump into this video, for those of you who've been missing the sound of my co-hosts, you're probably going to get a double whammy this time round. So it's kind of later in the day. I've had a bit of a slow day today, so I'm only just getting around to this now. Amira, the Chihuahua, Miss Snore Ahead, she's settling in, so you'll probably hear her snores, while my bigger dog has got the wanders. So she keeps basically getting up and going to a different part, either in or out of the room, and you're going to hear her claws clattering on the hardwood floors. I could pause when she does it, but she's just doing it so much today. I think she's figured out that my sister's left this morning to spend the next 4 weeks in Europe, and coming back via Seoul. And even though my sister doesn't actually live here, she does visit a few times a week, and my dogs adore her. And I think Tarka's picked up on the fact that Rachel's going to be away for a while. Maybe the clue was me not sleeping last night. Obviously, when someone that you're close to heads off for a month and you're not going to see them for a month, it keeps you awake. My biggest concern, of course, is the stuff that's going on in Korea, and that they are planning on going to Korea on their way home. Anyway, I've gone way off topic. So in this video, I want to look at the various dog narratives. Not just about Jenn's dog, but also about the Stearns' dogs, and also parts of this case that connect with the dogs. Now, I don't know if any of this is connected, but I'm kind of curious to see if there are connections here. And I just find it curious that we've been given these narratives about dogs from Stern's parents and from Jenn, because I'm starting to think that there's a lot of similarities between things that Chris Stearns has told us and things that have been said by Jenn and Stephan. And I'm starting to wonder if, when this whole narrative that Stephan gave, when that was concocted, if he may have had one or two helpers coming up with that narrative, because there's a few things that seem very similar between the three of them. And I will be doing a video on that, and I'm not sure what I think yet, but it's definitely something that I want to dig into a little bit more. But for this video, I just want to have a look at the stories about the dogs and just pull them apart a little bit. I know a lot of us keep coming back to this narrative about Stearns taking Jenn's dog out of a morning, and that's going to be the main focus for this video. I'm going to go through various clips where she's talking about that, and also clips relating to Stearns' dogs. And then at the end of the video, I'm going to look at some photos, have a bit of a chat about them, and also have a look at one particular document, or one page from the document, which I found kind of interesting. So let's jump in and start looking at these videos first.
Yeah.
When he visits, does he stay for like hours, days, weeks?
I would say days. This time we had planned on him staying a whole week because I was going through training at work. Mm-hmm. So I wanted him to be here to help me with the dog, help me with the training.
Okay.
I really don't buy this whole, I wanted him to be here to help me with the dog and help me with Maddie. Maddie was capable of walking the dog. When we hear from the neighbours, they talk about how Jenn usually walks the dog, but they had seen Maddie walking the dog also. She's 13. She's quite capable of walking the dog. I can remember when I was her age, I used to come home from high school, walk a kilometre home, get home, and take my little dog out for a walk. Obviously, we had a massive backyard. She didn't need to be taken for walks, but I used to do it anyway because it was my way of just getting away from everything and just not thinking about anything. So it would have actually been really good for Maddie to be taking that dog out for a walk and clearing her head a little bit. It was totally unnecessary. I really don't think that she was wanting Stearns to come and help her with the dog. And I mean, seriously, look at it. It's like a Maltese Shih Tzu cross or something. How much help do you need with a dog that size?
No, I just heard, if anything, Stephan came and woke me up accidentally because he was trying to let the dog out. And the dog gets really nervous sometimes. So I was trying to help him with that, get him on his leash. But he got him situated and took him for a walk.
So I'm going to play the different versions of this dog story because it progresses. She's working on it as she goes, in my opinion. On one hand, she's saying she wanted Stephan to come and help out with the dog. And now she's implying that he's pretty damn incompetent and doesn't know what he's doing with this dog, and she's got to help him out. Really? I just don't buy any of this crap. I do believe that he came in and got the dog, and I'll go further into that in a little way. But I don't know, it just doesn't, the whole narrative just does not sit right with me. So that's the first version of it. Let's see where she goes with this.
Okay, what time did you wake up? I'm going to say around 8 o'clock in the morning. Stephan came into the room and was trying to put the leash on the dog. Somewhere between, I'm going to say somewhere between, he came into the room somewhere between 8 and 8:15. He came in to put the leash on the dog, and I got up to try to help him because my dog is kind of a nervous dog and I didn't want him to pee on the bed. So we wrangled him, put him on his leash, and he said, "Go back to sleep." And I said, "Okay." So I laid back and went back to sleep. Okay.
So here she's introducing the notion of the dog being actually on her bed. And he woke her because the dog was on her bed and he was trying to wrangle the dog. And she woke up because she didn't want the dog to pee on her bed. So the progression here is him just coming in and wrangling the dog to take it for a walk, and now the dog's on her bed. Is this significant? Maybe, maybe not. But I did want to point out that there is a difference here. I also still think that there's just something wrong with this whole story.
It was still a little dark, and I was very sleepy. When I got up, I was kind of drunk. But he came in to walk the dog, to put the leash on the dog and walk him.
Was the dog in the room with you?
Yes.
So did he wake you up on purpose, or was it just kind of like the causation of him opening the door and you realizing somebody was there?
Yeah, the causation of him putting the leash on the dog, because the way the dog reacted, he gets very nervous and will urinate if you put the leash on him too directly. You have to like be nice and talk to him. He's a very he's a nervous dog. Yeah. So I got up to try to help him, and he said, "No, go back to sleep. I'm fine. I got this." And I said, "Are you sure?" He said, "Yeah." So I laid back down and went to sleep.
Okay, there's two significant things here in what she's saying. First of all, they ask her, "Was the dog in the room with you?" And she says yes. Keep that in mind, because we're going to go and listen to an interview with one of the flatmates, and that gives us a slightly different perspective here. But the other thing is, she talks about how she woke up because of how the dog reacted. And then she talks about if the dog's on the bed and you try and put a lead on it, it will pee. And then she says he got the dog, she helped him wrangle the dog. He said go back to sleep. She lay back down and went back to sleep. And he went out with the dog. Here's where I'm having a problem. She's saying this is how the dog reacted. She woke up because of how the dog reacted. And then she explains that the dog's reaction when you're putting a lead on it when you're on the bed is that it will pee. So she's essentially saying she woke up because the dog peed on her bed. And then she went back to sleep? You're kidding me, right? The dog peed on her bed and she went back to sleep with dog pee on the bed. Truly? Is she that much of a slob that she would go back to sleep with dog pee on her bed? Or is it just a complete utter BS story? And that's not what happened. Now, I can't figure out a motivation for this story being made up. But we know that Stephan doesn't give any part of the narrative about the dog, which is curious. So I'm wondering why we hear this from Jenn, and even after she's said it a few times, Stephan doesn't add it into his narrative. So why is this significant? I really can't quite figure out the purpose of this story. And on one hand, it makes me think, well, maybe this story is true, because I can't think of a motivation for making it up. But at the same time, I question this woman saying that her dog reacts by peeing on the bed when you try and put a lead on it, and that this is the reaction that occurred, essentially, and then she went back to bed. Something's not quite fitting together here.
All right, what's the first thing you remember when you wake up after having gone to sleep?
I wake up to Stephan trying to put the leash on the dog.
Okay. Now, is this the first time that you've ever woken up to Stephan trying to put a leash on your dog, or is that something that has occurred before in the past?
I'm going to say this is the first time. It's not normal for any of us to put the leash on the dog on the bed, because if he's on top of any, like, bed, couch, anything, he'll pee. He gets really nervous. You have to do it on the floor. So I found it really weird that he did that, but...
All right, so let me ask it a little more broadly. Is this the first time Stephan's ever come into your room while you're sleeping to take the dog out for you in the morning?
I can't recall it being something before.
Okay. Did you find it unusual then, or what did you think when this is occurring?
When it happened, I think I was more... I found it off, but I was more worried over the dog. I was like, please don't pee on the bed. I don't want to do laundry.
Okay.
So I was more anxious over that. He put the dog on the leash and told me to lay down and go back to sleep. And I said, okay.
So were you not laying down when he tells you to go back and lay down?
No, when he put the leash on the dog, I shot off the bed because I was going to help him. I was like, no, let me do it. And he's like, no, go back to sleep. I'm fine. I got this.
So, two things that I noticed from this. First of all, she's being so evasive with her answers. She's not giving them direct answers. They ask her, is this the first time that he's done this? And she's like, I want to say it's the first time. That's not an affirmative answer. That's not, it's the first time. That's kind of like, it may be the first time, it may not be the first time. I want to say it's the first time. And then she goes on to say it's not normal for any of us to put the lead on when he's on furniture. Any of us as in who? Does that mean that he has at some point in time put the lead on the dog before? Or is she just referring to her and Maddie? Who is any of us? And then when they ask her, has he done this before? She goes quiet again. She does the usual Jenn sideways dance. She says, I can't recall. Well, of course you're going to be able to remember if someone has taken your dog out for a walk before. So why is she being so evasive? It's very, very odd. But the other thing I noticed here, and you'll see this quite often with Jenn, is that she doesn't cope with her narrative being interrupted. She had launched into her usual narrative of I was woken up by Stephan coming in to put the lead on the dog, and they interrupted her. And then she couldn't come up with the answers over this. She was struggling to find the right answers. And then she had to fumble a bit, and she went straight back into her narrative. And the narrative came out again, pretty much identical to everything we've heard in the past. So, to me, that suggests that I think perhaps Stephan did go into her room that morning for something. But if it was to take the dog for a walk, I don't think so. Maybe he did go in to get the dog for some reason. But something is out of kilter here. Something just isn't quite right with this narrative. And I just don't know what it is. I can't see why she would need to lie about him coming into her room. I can't see why she would need to create the narrative about him coming in to walk the dog. And part of me thinks that he did come in and get the dog, and I'll come back to that. But something just isn't adding up here.
When you walked downstairs and you were going out to leave, was Jen's dog wandering around anywhere?
Jen's dog is typically sleeping next to the couch.
Okay.
But I don't remember seeing him.
Okay.
I usually see him on the couch. So if I tell you I saw, it's because I typically see him on the couch. But I can't really say if I remember seeing him.
Now.
So now we have the roommate telling us the dog doesn't even sleep in Jen's room. Normally when she comes through, the dog is sleeping next to the couch. And this is consistent with the story that Jenn gives in terms of leaving her door ajar because the cat sleeps in her room. So she leaves the door ajar so the cat can come and go. She doesn't say, I leave the door ajar so the dog can come and go. So it seems to me that the reality is that this dog doesn't normally sleep in Jen's room. So why was Stephan in there with the dog on a lead in her room when the dog's not normally there? And here's what I'm wondering. Was he perhaps bringing the dog into her room to get it out of the way? And that's what was going on. Because we've seen how attached to Maddie that dog was. You've seen the picture. I used it as a thumbnail. Maddie adored that dog. You can see the dog enjoyed her company. And if he was trying to carry Maddie out of the house, dogs can be so very intuitive about things. Like I said at the start of this video, my Kelpie Lab Cross is out of sorts because she's figured out that my sister's gone away for a month. Whether she's read that from my body language somehow, or from my sister popping around yesterday and she read something in Rachel's body language, but she knew. And what was going on in that house was far more obvious than just someone going away for a month. I mean, as far as we know, he carried Maddie's deceased body down the stairs, out of the house and into his car. That dog was attached to Maddie, so I think that dog would have had a reaction. So was it that what occurred there is that he took the dog into Jenn to get the dog out of the way? And did Jenn know that's what was going on? Or was she just confused at that moment in time and hadn't put two and two together? Maybe he didn't tell her till later on, because I honestly believe that she did know what happened. Their stories are far too similar. And maybe that's why he doesn't discuss the dog, because his truth of the narrative there is that he was taking the dog into Jenn's room to get it out of the way. So maybe for him it's easier to leave the dog out of the narrative entirely. I'd love to know what everyone else thinks about this and what you think about what was going on here with this dog. Of course, the thing is that the lead for that dog was kept in Jenn's room. So she doesn't actually say that she heard him come and get the lead at any time. According to her, she woke up as he was wrangling the dog on her bed. And it's not usual for the dog to be on her bed with the lead on. Now, if the dog had had the lead put on out in the kitchen area, going by what she says about the dog gets nervous when you put its lead on and you've got to calm it first, otherwise it pees. Does that mean that maybe the dog had the lead put on before it was taken into Jenn's room and it didn't actually pee on Jenn's bed? Because she doesn't explicitly say that it did. She just says that normally if you try and put the lead on it on furniture, it will pee. But she claims that she went back to sleep, which suggests that it didn't pee, which suggests that it already had the lead on when it was on her bed. So my original thoughts on the dog, when first time I heard her talking about Stephan putting the dog on a lead, was that I thought he must have come in and grabbed the dog and tied it up somewhere so he could take Maddie out. But then, having listened to the flatmate talking about the dog sleeping in the lounge room area, the living room area, sleeping next to the couch, it makes more sense to me that that dog was in the way when he was trying to carry Maddie out of the house. And he needed to put the lead on it, bring it into Jenn's room, leave it with Jenn so that he could take Maddie out. And I think she has because she's, you know, not the brightest person either, I think she has started talking about being woken up by Stephan wrangling the dog on her bed, then realised that, hang on, I probably shouldn't be giving this narrative, because if she's woken up to it and he's actually been taking the dog in there to leave her, she would know that he took the lead off. Now that's all speculation, of course, but to me it makes the most sense. Why would that dog be in her room otherwise, unless he took it in there himself? Why would she go back to sleep if the dog had peed on her bed? You wouldn't. You would get up, you would strip the bed sheets off and you'd put them in the wash. She didn't do that, so to me that suggests that the dog didn't pee on her bed, meaning that the lead was not put on the dog on the bed. The dog was put on the bed while it still had its lead on. Now, there was some speculation about him wanting the lead from the dog to use in the car to secure Maddie. I'll come back to that further on in the video. But at this point, I want to switch the attention to the different stories that we have from the Stearnses in relation to their dogs. These two narratives, I don't believe that they expressly connect with the narrative about Jenn's dog, but I have questions about them. And like I said, I wanted to use this video to examine all these different narratives. So I'm just going to look at the brief narrative from Deb's perspective first, and then move on from there.
She's not at our house because my wife, well, here's something strange.
Is anybody at your house now?
Yes, hang on a second. We raise standard poodles.
Say it again?
We raise standard poodles.
Oh, okay.
Poodle. And they all, except they went on full fucking alert.
House,
Yes.
throughout this period of time.
Yes.
At what time do you think
That's
that
what
was?
I'm
Okay.
319.
3:19 a.m.?
Yeah.
Now, I know a lot of people have dismissed this story about the dogs going on full alert at 3:19 because it is so obvious that Stephan wasn't down at Northport at 3:19. And even at a later date when they changed the story to the dogs going on full alert at 5:19, we still know that's too early for Stephan to have been down there. But here's what I think is going on here. Because Chris Stearns has a way of introducing stories to the conversation that he hasn't been asked about, and this was one of those instances. They're asking one thing, and he goes, well, now here's the thing. He has to get this narrative out. And he does this at another time too, which I'll cover it. But this is something that's important to him. Why is it important to suggest that the dogs went on full alert at 3:19 when he even admits in his interview that it's not physically possible for Stephan to have been down there then because he'd seen Stephan a little bit before 3 a.m. up at Kissimmee. Here's what I think's going on here. I think this whole idea of the dogs going on full alert at 3:19 is to convince Northport Police, to convince the Orlando Police that Stephan couldn't possibly have been down there because when the dogs went on alert it was far too early for him to have been there. The inference here being that the dogs would have had to have gone on alert when he was there, and that this is the one and only time that they went on alert. That hasn't been expressly said, but that is the inference. That is what the listener is supposed to believe. Otherwise, why would he bring it up? Why would it be remotely relevant? To me, it's a definite red herring. He's trying to convince the officers that the dogs would have to go on alert. But they went on alert at 3:19, which is far too early, so Stephan wasn't there. But, I mean, let's be real. Maybe they did go on alert later on and he's not saying anything. Or perhaps because Stephan actually lives in that house, the dogs didn't react to him entering the house. Because we know that he actually did go in the house. FBI did a cast and they came up with him actually accessing Google at that address for half an hour that particular morning. So to me it seems like Chris Stearns has introduced this to the narrative as a distraction. Just like him latching on to the whole storage unit narrative. That should have been something that was quickly dismissed when you think about it with the storage units. They thought the code had been used, they discovered the code hadn't been used, end of story. But Chris Stearns ran with the whole storage unit narrative to try and distract. That's what I believe. And I have done videos on this, so if you are interested, check out my Madeline Soto playlist and you'll be able to see the videos that connect with Chris Stearns and Deb Stearns, and that's where I cover a lot of these things. So, moving on, when was the other instance that Chris offered up information that hadn't been asked for? Let's listen to some more clips.
What about the Lincoln that you impounded? What's the status of that?
That's still being processed.
Okay. I just want to give you fair warning that it's the Poodle ambulance.
It's the Poodle ambulance.
Because we put the dogs in there for when they're coming in season, or they just had a litter of pups, so sometimes they get puke or blood smeared on the seats, and even though you try to clean it up, I said, I don't want somebody to get too excited and all of a sudden you pick up, you know.
We've got experts on the case.
Makes a lot of sense.
It's animal blood.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. The Poodle ambulance. Oh, thank you.
You know, you put these pads down and they still manage to like their rear ends.
Well, of course.
Leather seats, and you go, oh.
They're like kids, you know. They just poop and pee and vomit all over the place. And,
Now, the context for this, Chris Stearns brought this up after finding out that his son had been arrested for the CSAM stuff. And of course, he's connecting the dots and realising that they're also looking at his son for Maddie's disappearance. They've impounded the car. Why are they going to impound the car? Because they think that Stearns transported Maddie's body in the car. Chris Stearns is a smart man. He knows these things. And to me, him offering up this information randomly out of the blue, this is a guy who was supposedly a cop for 2 years. So he should have some understanding of forensics. He should know that a decent forensics lab is going to be able to tell the difference between dog blood, dog vomit, and anything that comes from a human. So, why is he bringing this up? It's that classic look the other way strategy. Normally, I would say it's the some other dude narrative. In this case, it's the some other dog narrative. If you find anything in the car, if it comes up with a mag light, or if you spray some luminol don't look at it because it's probably just from dogs. To me, this whole thing just didn't ring true. Now, the other thing is, seriously, are you going to be transporting dogs when they're bleeding? Unless it's an utter emergency, in which case, wouldn't you have something on where the dog is bleeding to stop the bleeding? It just seems like a highly unlikely narrative to me. But there's also a problem with the narrative, which we'll get to shortly.
What about the car?
The car, no.
Yeah, we already know that. Yeah, I've already kissed that goodbye.
Okay.
We use that as a Poodle ambulance.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
The silver car, because the dogs go to the vet, or if they have some surgeries, or the puppies, or what have you. The back seat, could be smeared with puke, blood, and what else? But we call it the Poodle ambulance.
Did, when you gave Stephen this car to go to Kissimmee, clean inside?
No. It's the Poodle ambulance. We're not going to have that car detailed. And then if he's using it, and of course Debbie had a bunch of her stuff in it, but no, that car was not clean.
Okay.
And I said, well, if forensics is going to go over that, I mean, I tried to tell somebody, I said, it's a Poodle ambulance. There's going to be some leftover puke or blood or what have you that we weren't able to get out of the seats because they're perforated. So I hope somebody doesn't get too excited when they hit on something, but it's animal blood as far as I knew.
Again, this time he was so desperate to get that information out that he had to jump in before the officer directed the conversation elsewhere. The detective was just about to ask another question, and Chris butted in with the Poodle ambulance story. Now, he mentions here that you would find that stuff on the back seat. They transport the dogs on the back seat of the car. Keep that in mind. That's something that I think is significant, that I think has been overlooked. But I personally think that I just don't believe the story of that there's going to be a whole heap of poodle blood and poop and stuff in that car. Because, I mean, who does? Yeah, my Chihuahua occasionally will vomit in the car. I'm not going to leave it there. I'm going to clean it up. I use wet wipes to clean it up first of all. Then I go out and I scrub the seat. Well, who's going to leave that sort of stuff just in there? If it gets down into the gaps, you use a brush to clean it. But, he makes it sound like they're frequently transporting dogs that are bleeding profusely or vomiting heaps. This story just doesn't feel legitimate to me. It feels to me like he has brought it up to try and distract from anything that they may find in the car. I think he strongly believes that Stephan has transported Maddie. He probably doesn't realise that his son is as much of a dumbass as he is, and thinks that if he's transporting her, he's probably transported her on the back seat. Hence the story and the specific mention of the back seat. Because, I mean, you'd have to be a bit of a dumbass, really, to transport someone sitting upright in the front of the car. Unless, of course, you are Stephan Stearns. Now, I'm going to go on and first of all look at a document, and then I'm going to go through some images. Now, this is one of the reports from the search of the apartment. Now, bear in mind, that this was done 24 hours after when supposedly Stearns was wrangling the dog. So if the dog had peed on the bed and it had been left there, it would have dried. But let's just look at the description first and then I'll go further into that. So they're specifically referring to a master bedroom within the northwest corner of the first floor. So that's up there in the first line. The highlighted bit is visible stains were observed on both the fitted sheet and flat sheet. Now, here's my thoughts. Like I said, yes, they wouldn't know if they were, well, you would expect that they would know that they were older or newer. I think that if it looked like dog pee, they would probably refer to it as something other than just stains. But like I said, what normal human being would go back to bed and go back to sleep if their dog had just peed on their bed? You wouldn't. I can't imagine even Jenn doing that. So I'm kind of leaning towards these being older stains, like literal stains, not recent stains from a dog peeing on the bed. But obviously that's not definitive, but I thought I should at least show you the mention of that. Given the things that were going on in that household, I'm kind of leaning towards them being stains from other things and not from the dog. Okay, I have to admit, I didn't find this on my own. I actually had to go and watch Grizzly's video when she did the tour of the house, because I could not spot it for myself. But then when I did see it, when she pointed out in her video, it was like, oh yeah. So I'm going to zoom in now so you can see what I'm talking about. Okay, so looking at the shelf there, that looks to me like that is a dog lead. Like I said, I looked really hard and I couldn't find it. And I guess because it is a dark colour. But thanks to Grizzly, someone on her channel spotted it when she was doing the walk through the house. So that means that he wasn't going in there to collect the lead to use to secure Maddie in the car, because the lead is back in the house right there. Or did he? Maybe he returned it. Who knows? Maybe he figured Jenn would miss it. But I'm going to show you some more images which to me suggest that this lead had nothing to do with anything. To me, it just suggests that he did come and, well, if it happened that he did wrangle the dog, bring it into Jenn's room, because it doesn't appear that it did actually pee on her bed, and also why would he need to collect it from her room when it doesn't sleep in her room, and then the lead has been replaced. So why am I certain that he didn't use this lead? Let's move on and look at some more pictures. So while they clearly did transport their dogs in that car, I still don't believe in the whole Poodle ambulance narrative in terms of if you find anything, it's going to be from the dogs. But here we have labelled, this is what they found on the front passenger floor. Bearing in mind that Chris Stearns said that the dogs travel in the back of the car. So you've got an umbrella. Well, I've probably got one of them on the floor of my car in the front. But you've got what looks like either a dog harness or a dog lead. It's hard to tell because of how tangled up it is. If it's leads, then they're looped through each other. If it's a harness, well, that's kind of interesting too. It's an interesting kind of harness. Let me know what you think it is. But being on the front passenger floor is interesting because if it was used for Stearns' dogs, shouldn't it be in the back of the car? So whether or not it was used, it shows that he didn't need Jenn's dog's lead at all if he was going to try and secure Maddie in the car. But the fact that this was in the front of the car and not the back definitely makes me question if this could have been used. What else was in the front of the car? Okay, so a lot of people have said that the leads in the car are insignificant because they travel the dogs in the car. So the leads are there for the dogs. But Chris Stearns specifically said the dogs travel in the back of the car. This lead is on the front passenger seat. This lead is not used for a dog. Not only that, take a look at the length of the lead. Now, bearing in mind that when you are transporting a dog, generally if you are attaching something to the collar, then you are going to do it from a higher point. If you're attaching from the harness, then generally there's a loop that goes through the seat belt that then reaches up to the harness. Now, given that these people are dog breeders, you would think that they would be doing things the correct way to transport their dogs. But either way, like I said, Chris Stearns made it clear that the dogs travel in the back of the car. And I would imagine that the way they were talking about the dogs, like we transport the dogs, sounds like they do it together, so you would have one of them in the passenger seat. And if, let's just run with the story for now that the dogs do get blood and vomit and stuff in the car. Well, if you are regularly travelling in the passenger seat, you're not going to want that on there anyway. So I do believe him when he says the dogs travel in the back of the car. So you have this lead that is so long that it nearly touches the seat, like the actual base of the seat. That's quite long for securing a dog, right? Now, as much as I hate to say this, it's been extended out almost to full length, and when you look at the length of it, you could actually put that around someone's neck if you were trying to secure a deceased person. I know that sounds triggering, but that's something to keep in mind as we look at the next picture. Now, if you're not overly familiar with poodles, when you hear someone talk about standard poodles, you may not necessarily realise that they're talking about the original size of the breed. Not toy poodles, which are the more popular ones that we see more of these days. Standard poodles are damn big dogs. And you can see here just how big they are. This was during the interview that they did in September, And they had this dog in with them because apparently she's the ringleader. So by having her in with them, they were keeping the other dogs quiet. But you can see her size. Obviously she was on the floor and she was sitting up and putting her paws on Deb. This is not a dog that's like standing up on her back feet. She was sitting and putting her paws on Deb. Meaning that if she were to be sitting on the front seat of the car, that dog lead would have been way, way, way too long. You would have a clip pretty much at the level of the headrest, not hitting almost on the seat. Note also, you can see she's wearing a collar. These dogs wear collars, not harnesses. Maybe they've got a travel harness, but like I said, generally you're not going to attach a lead to a harness from higher up. That's not securing the dog. The whole point is to prevent the dog from moving. So you want it to be secured from lower down so the dog can't stand up or move. So when you consider the size of the dog, when you take into account what Chris Stern said, that the dogs are transported in the back seat of the car, regardless of whether or not the story is true about the back of the car having dog vomit and dog blood and everything, that lead wasn't there for the dogs. Now, someone made a really, really interesting point in one of my recent videos, and just a shout out to that person because it was a quite insightful and I hadn't thought of this before. So, one thing that people have been discussing is that there's been so much focus on Maddie's medications and the possibility that she may have been over-medicated that night. And there was the question about Jenn's medical marijuana as well. So it leads people to believe that there is a possibility perhaps that Maddie was overdosed. And when we hear descriptions of some of the images, it sounds like Maddie was drugged in some of those images. So there's been a lot of speculation about whether or not she overdosed. And one of the videos that I talked about, where I talked about medications and stuff, I pointed out the reaction that Jenn has when asked about Maddie's medications as she gets to the point of Maddie's asthma inhaler. She said she had an asthma inhaler, and then her voice lowers and she repeats it again, and she has this, what to me comes across as a trauma reaction. If you want to see that particular video, it is one about Maddie's meds, so you should be able to find it in the playlist. But she has this definite reaction over Maddie's inhaler that to me seems like there's something serious there. She's triggered by something to do with Maddie's ability to breathe. Did she stop breathing because she was overdosed? Did she stop breathing because she was strangled? Jenn, when they ask her what she thinks happened to Maddie, she says those two things. She says maybe he choked her, or did she overdosed or something like that. She says, because they're the two things that would leave no evidence. To me, that sounds guilty as hell. But here's my question. A lot of people have been saying, well, we've heard that the cause of death was strangulation. We've heard about the broken hyoid bone. But is it possible that she may have overdosed and that the broken hyoid bone occurred as a result of her being secured in place in that vehicle? Just a thought. Obviously, I think the medical examiner is going to have a better idea than just some YouTuber, but we haven't seen the full autopsy. We may never see the full autopsy. But it's something just to keep in mind. Either way, I think a few things we can take away from this video in terms of Stephan going into Jenn's room and wrangling the dog. The lead was still in that room, and we've seen that there were enough leads and stuff in that car that he didn't need Sailor's lead to secure Maddie in the car. So there was some other reason for him wrangling that dog in Jenn's room that morning. Given that the dog normally sleeps out in the living room area next to the couch, to me the most logical explanation is that the dog was in the way and he needed to get it out of the way, so he needed to get it into Jenn's room, and the only way he could do that was by putting the lead on it and taking it into her room. Did he explain to Jenn why he took the dog into the room? Perhaps. Moving on to the car. Lots of speculation over that dog lead. Comments being, well, the leads were there for the Stearns' dogs. They're not important. But Chris Stearns himself says the dogs travel in the back of the car. That lead was really, really long. That lead was too long to secure a standard poodle by attaching to the collar in the front of a car. Now obviously I could be completely wrong on this. These are just my observations and my thoughts, and I'd really love to hear what other people think about this. I love reading your comments on these videos, and in this video particularly I'm really looking forward to seeing people's comments, because there is a lot of room for interpretation here. And there's a lot of different things here that I've discussed in relation to the dogs. So I'm really keen to see what other people think about these particular narratives. See what other people think about the dog lead that was attached to the front seat of the car. So, thanks for listening. If you're new, please subscribe to my channel. Also, please hit the like button. That helps get my video out further into the algorithm, helps get more people seeing my video. And please leave a comment. I'm really looking forward to seeing your thoughts on this topic, because as you can tell, I'm not entirely decided on a number of things to do with these particular narratives, and I'd really love to see what you guys think. So thanks, and I'll catch you in the next one.